constitutionally, you have found that it is illegal for anyone to be charged a property tax on their real estate.
Yes, that is why the 16th Amendment says you can tax an income. You cannot tax property. We are at the tipping point. The property values have skyrocketed. In the last 5 years, 21.25 trillion of property overvaluation has occurred. Look at what's happened and what caused it to skyrocket. It wasn't the market. It was the fraud at the hands of these school districts. What's hidden from the public is how much school bond debt is associated on a per household basis across the United States. But the answer to that is about $5 trillion worth of bond fraud, from which in 2024, the system stole $450 billion from the property owners. These chief appraisers actually go to retreats and teach each other how to screw over the citizens of the states that they are operating in. And that's why the values of your houses in today's market are pure fraud. It can't be the average price when the median household income, being the average, can't afford it. There's no justification for what they're doing. I kid you not, it's over 15 pages of laws that have been broken here. It's as crooked can be. The whole system is a Ponzi scheme. They're hiding the truth from the public. So we're coming after them criminally, and we're coming after them through the U.S. Supreme Court. Either people get on board and get this fixed and work these debts down effective immediately, or this system will blow to shreds.
Mitch Vexler, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you for inviting me back.
So you're advocating to end property taxes in the United States. I've been following you on this, and we have a lot to really unpack here today because it seems like you're actually making some progress here, Mitch. But before we dive in and get started, I just want to, if you could just tell our audience, who is Mitch Vexler and what do you do on a daily basis?
Under normal circumstances, I am a builder of multifamily and retail properties. In the last several months, it's been pretty well full-time to get where we are today, which is about to be filing a full-blown criminal complaint with the Department of Justice that should take place within the next couple of days. The reason that I'm doing this is that I am a monkey in the middle, in that I am a property developer, but I'm only as good as my tenants can pay rent. And when those tenants have problems paying rent, then I would have problems paying what would take to build multifamily in my case. So once we realized what was going on, it's been a series of lawsuits annually for the last several years. And it's just ramped up to the point where we found across the United States very similar patterns in practice. And that is what is spelled out in this criminal complaint that we're about to file.
So basically what you're saying is that from what I understand, and we'll unpack this, but from what I understand, the complaint is that property taxes are unconstitutional. I want to pull up here shortly Article 14 and 16. You referenced 16. I want to talk about 14 as well. But not only, and Mitch, the last time that you and I spoke, that we had you on the show, I mean, it was a very popular video. I think it's well over 400,000 views and a lot of comments, because as you started to unpack this, uncover this, it's not just the fact that you think it's unconstitutional for us to pay property taxes, but you also have found, and I want to talk more on that, fraud in what you're saying, the way that property assessments are even carried out. And so certainly, sir, a lot to unpack here. But before we dive in, even just to get the ball rolling here and kind of roll up our sleeves, last month you wrote an article on Zero Hedge titled Fraud on a Mass Scale, Why Trump Should Repeal Real Estate Tax. And it was actually a brief of you, Mitchell Vexler, as amicus curiae, supporting property owners across Texas and the United States of America. It's a bill to repeal real estate tax in favor of a uniform states sales tax. So for those who don't know, tell us, what is an amicus curiae? And am I even saying that right?
It was a method of stating that I'm doing what I'm doing as if there was a lawsuit. So it's basically an interjection into a court proceeding that says you've got problems and we're helping you, the court, recognize what's going on. It's a fairly complex issue with regard to the mathematics under the hood that we use to determine what was really happening. But to your point, bond fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, accounting fraud, it's all elements of what is now spelled out in this about to be filed criminal complaint with the DOJ. It's all in there. The problem with the zero hedge, obviously, you're somewhat limited in capacity as to how to spell all this out. And it's taken a long time and a lot of videos. And frankly, your help and Dr. Chris Martinson, a lot of people have come together to help get this information into the public. But now is the process necessary because certain officials, government officials, have refused to do their job, even though they were told in writing they were breaking the law. And that makes the matters even worse, which is why we are now headed for the DOJ in Washington, Pam Bondi. They refused to do their job. They were told they were breaking the law. Then they refused to change direction and refused to recognize the problems. The only ramification left, the only method left is the DOJ.
So back up just a minute. You said that they were advised that they were breaking the law, but refused to do anything about it. Who advised these people and who are they?
I don't want to say specifically at this very second, but I will tell you it's government officials. I will state it's the executive branch here in the state of Texas. I will state it is the chief appraiser in particular. The names I don't want to release until this document is filed with the DOJ, which will be about 2 days out. But it's naming names, full blown. And we even have their own documents. We have their testimony, right? Because they gave testimony under threat of perjury in the public. We have it all lined up. Video, audio, it's all there. Every stitch of it, right down to a thumb drive will be handed off to Pam Bondi at the DOJ.
Now you're in Texas.
Yes.
Does what we're covering right now, what you're about to, talk about here, not knowing what that is, but just saying, you know a lot of what you're doing, does this apply to everyone that owns real estate in the United States? And I guess it's affecting tenants too, because as property owners are paying property taxes that are going up quite rapidly, especially 2024 from 2023, which we're going to pull up some data and go over. But does this apply to all 50 states and DC, or are you finding where this isn't happening in certain states?
It's worse than you think. It literally applies, believe it or not, to every single citizen of the United States of America, not just the tax-paying real estate property owners. So what happens in the last 5 years, 21.25 trillion of property overvaluation has occurred, from which in 2024, the system stole $450 billion from the property owners. But the tax ramifications of that under the hood, there are 7 or 8 elements of, just for example, your cappuccino in the morning. Those are 7 or 8 real estate taxes that are in your cappuccino. Well, so they've artificially and fraudulently created a valuation from which the assessed value is created. That system at the real estate tax side is a fraud in and of itself. Well, who owns those central appraisal districts that are committing that fraud? Well, the answer is the school districts and the taxing entities. The school districts have bonds. The school districts raise bonds based on the implicit, it's not true, but it's an implicit guarantee of the taxpayers. But we are now at the point where I have stated in the criminal complaint that not a single taxpayer has agreed to go bankrupt as a direct result of the fraud being created at the taxing entities, which are the school districts and who are the master of the central appraisal districts. The entire system is a fraud. We have the evidence, we're proving it, we're stating it. We've stated it in the past, except now we're stating it straight to the DOJ.
So you're saying that the appraisal district, Central Appraisal District, is controlled by school boards?
They are owned by the taxing entities. So the taxing entities also includes the municipalities. But in this case, it's the school districts that we're focused on, because the school districts, give or take, are responsible for 83% of all outstanding bonds raised. They are the liability of that 83%. So if you look at your tax bill, you can figure out in your state how much the school districts actually receive in tax funding. Then they take that tax funding for every dollar and they'll lever it up 20 to 1 plus. But recently, in addition to all of this, and the reason the accounting fraud came up is because we've asked any school district in the United States, if you've got sources and uses on your balance sheet, if you have a bond schedule, and if you would be so kind as to turn that over to anybody that's asking, even through a Freedom of Information Act, that would be great. Problem is, it doesn't exist, or they refuse to turn it over, to the point where even Ken Paxton, who's the Attorney General in the state of Texas, literally told a school district, it's in writing, turn it over. The school district said, stuff it. We're not turning it over. Well, we dug in under the hood, and what did we find? We found investment pools. So that school district has an investment pool on their balance sheet. What's in that investment pool? Well, there's no notes to the balance sheet to describe who's getting benefit of that investment pool. Did the school superintendent pay into that system? Did the principals pay into that system? How long is their tenure? What are the benefits that they're receiving? Well, the answer to those questions doesn't exist in the notes to the balance sheet. No notes to the balance sheet, no sources and uses, and no bond schedule. The combination is pure fraud.
And this is...
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I don't want to stop you.
Then the accountants under the hood, what we also discovered is that they say, well, we're just accounting for what we were given. Well, that's complete nonsense, because by law, they're directed to do an audit. The audits that they are doing are not, in fact, audits. They don't even conform to GAAP, generally accepted appraisal practices. They are literally shirking the law. They don't care. And they've been caught.
Wow. And this is happening in all 50 states?
It's hard to say that it's happening in all 50 states. What is clear is that, yes, it is happening in the vast majority. In order to truly get pieces of data that we want, it would require AI. It would require Doge, because Doge has access very quickly to what we want. Anything that touches USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, is highly suspect. And it turns out that these chief appraisers actually go to retreats and teach each other how to screw over the citizens of the states that they are operating in. That's how bad this is. And ideally, what we would like to have is a little bit more information. It doesn't matter. It's all crooked anyway. But if you think about it, what's hidden from the public is how much school bond debt is associated on a per household basis across the United States. Well, our rough numbers show that the answer to that, give or take, is about $5 trillion worth of bond fraud. And how did we get there? Well, we took $50,000. Like, there's actually houses here in Argyle, Texas, as an example, where the debt load per household is $243,000 per house. Okay, if your average house in Argyle is $450,000, that's a 50% increase in the debt load on that house. And they can't pay it. They don't know it's there, but it's there.
When you're considering what they're doing with the bonds. Is that how you're coming at? Right. So when they're levering up, so just so that I'm clear and that the audience is clear. So the schools are getting the money from the property taxes. They're taking this money, levering them up into bonds.
Yes.
And then not being transparent with what those bonds are creating on an investment side and who's being paid by the upside of the bonds. Is that correct?
Yes, and it gets worse. So there's something called here in Texas 313 agreements, and those 313 agreements are additional leverage in the system. And in particular, in the Itasca School District, those 313 agreements were used to help fund private developers into 2,000-acre solar fields. Well, turns out, based on the documents that we read, there's no expected, as in demanded or required, return of capital or return on capital. So when you start breaking these things down, they're all connected at the hip. And further to the point, if you ask, how could a school superintendent, which is their job is to oversee the principals of a school district, who typically don't have any accounting background, sign off that a school district that's worth allegedly $8 million by their estimate is now kissing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of private developer financing? It's as crooked can be, but this is what happened.
Wow. On your, I don't even know what to say to that, but in your brief, you have written down here, the home affordability and probability of bankruptcy graphic below shows taxation of unrealized gains, which is a violation of the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Market value is a mechanism in Texas and most states in the union from which the assessed value is created. So along the lines of this is where they're getting the money to lever up for the bonds. Let's talk about that. Explain. So the way that they're doing it, and just so everybody understands, so unrealized gains means that you haven't, my understanding, that you haven't put the money in your pocket. So you buy a house 20 years ago, and what happened just happened, over the last 5 years, where interest rates, artificially suppressed interest rates for mortgages, or affecting more, helping mortgages to be down in a 2 and 3 handle, allowed property values to skyrocket out of control. Now you, the owner of the real estate, are getting these higher assessments, and you're paying money on that. And this is what, in reading, the 16th Amendment here to the U.S. Constitution, is saying that that's unconstitutional, that you're taxed on this gain. It's an unrealized gain. You haven't realized you may be living in that house. You're paying the same mortgage payment over 30 years. You haven't taken that extra money and stuck it in your pocket. Mitch, can you kind of explain this concept?
Yes, that's part of the fraud. So let's back up for a second. Unrealized gain, you can only have in real estate an actual gain when a property is closed, cash transaction, and cash in hand. That would determine the value. But that's not what's happening. They are claiming, the central appraisal districts, that market value is the unrealized gain. It's one and the same. Well, you can't do that by virtue of the 16th Amendment. There's no such thing. So when a central appraisal district says, well, we're going to deem your house and it has a market value of $400,000. Well, the problem with that is they take that market value, then they turn it into an assessed value, right? It's kabuki theater. Then they say, well, we're going to tax you based on the assessed value, but you can't even file a challenge on the assessed value. You can only file a challenge on the market value. The whole system is a scam. That's the reality. So, and then they prohibit you from getting access to due process under the 5th and 14th Amendment to the Constitution, again by kabuki theater, where they say, well, we're going to create an ARB panel, an appraisal review board, to help you, the citizens. But that never happens. The ARB is a puppet for the central appraisal district. But they can't get away from the fact that they created a value. And when you said, well, the property values have skyrocketed, look at what's happened and what caused it to skyrocket. It wasn't the market. It was the fraud. People think it's the market. But when you've got the central appraisal districts jumping 30, 40, 50, in case of my own house, 60% in a single year, under what justification inside of USPAP based on standard deviation or any math on this planet can you do that? The answer is none. What they have done is they hand overwrote their own software, created a value of what they wanted it to be, not what it is. And we'll get to that in a second. And then they turn around and say, pay us, or if you don't, we'll take your property. And that falls under RICO. And inside the DOJ document, we've laid the case and the premise for RICO. That's where all this is headed. Well, funny thing about the dollar amounts that are being charged, and I want to go back to that so to help people understand how bad this is.
I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. I just wanted to take a brief moment and let you know that this podcast is brought to you by SaxRealty.com. Here at Sax Realty, we're committed to bringing you the best real estate education and helping buyers and sellers achieve their real estate goals. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please consider doing so now. And don't forget, we're on every major social media platform, so you can follow us there as well. Now back to the show.
I want to go back to that Argyle case. Actually, never mind. Let's use another one. We'll use Godley, okay? Godley, Texas. Small little community. Do you know in that Texas community, $90,000 per household is the outstanding school bond debt? Here's the problem. The average value of a house in Godley, Texas is $160,000. That's 52% increase in the outstanding mortgage. That's two mortgages on one house. One is implicit that nobody signed up for, right? Nobody signed a document that says, well, I'm going to allow the school districts to steal my money and put me into bankruptcy. So most of these people can't afford their first mortgage, right? Because the cost of inflation today and the cost of housing, it has ballooned past their point, their incomes to keep up. Well, did anybody tell them that they've got another $90,000 mortgage on top of their head? Do they have the ability to pay for that? No. What does that really mean? Well, that's the definition of bankruptcy. So think about this for a second. If you simply say, that's $90,000 in Godley, Texas. If you simply say, okay, let's take $50,000 times the amount of households in the United States, it's 143 million. Let's say that 50,000 is outstanding. Well, Houston, we have a problem. Why? Because it's the equivalent, give or take, of $7 trillion. Now, you would say a certain amount is legit. That's fine, about $1.5 trillion. So the reality is $5.3 trillion in outstanding bond fraud at the hands of these school districts. DOJ has the ability to scrape the data to get to the truth of how much across the United States. Within a few days, they can do it using AI. Problem is, the public can't see it. We can't see it across the states. We only know what we know because of the Bond Review Board, which is a Texas government operation. And we were able to scrape some of the data out of them. And we created a bond schedule that says, here's the amount on these communities: Godley, Itasca, Argyle, Aubrey. We were able to get that data. And that's how we figured out how much it was, give or take, across the state of Texas, which in total, just based on what the BRB has told us, right? Not all this information is available. So the BRB says, well, outstanding in Texas right now is 130 billion, based on the information that they are allowed to track. That's not the whole cost, right? Because the school districts have operations and maintenance on top of all this. So it's not just what's outstanding at $90,000 in the case of Godley, Texas. It's what's on top of it, in addition to the second mortgage that is based on an implicit guarantee that doesn't exist. We've drawn the map for the DOJ.
Mitch, has anybody ever presented this before, or are you the first one that you know of?
As far as I know, no. And the reason for that is most attorneys, as it turns out, are really bad at math. So what we've done is we took the math and then we tied that to USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, which is not bad. There's nothing really wrong with it. Its problem is the central appraisal districts that opine to use it, and the states that state in their state property tax code, we use USPAP and we adhere to it, are lying. They're not. That document may as well not exist. So we took the math, we tied it to USPAP, we took USPAP, we tied it to the Texas Property Tax Code, we tied it to the Texas Education Act, we tied it to the Texas Constitution, and we tied it to the US Constitution. The box is complete. They cannot get out. The facts are the facts. By the way, it's their evidence. It's their documents. It's the documentation of the Bond Review Board. It's the documentation of the Central Appraisal Districts. It's a documentation as required under the Texas Education Act. It's their documents. It's their testimony. It's their videos. It's their lies in the press under threat of perjury. These people are guilty.
I kind of have a feeling that maybe you're not saying the names now, but maybe you were saying names in the last video that we did. Maybe they're some of the same people, which, I don't know. Maybe they are, because you had mentioned some names specifically. I want to talk about, Mitch, the Central Appraisal District. Well, first, let me ask, how did the school districts, the school boards, how the hell did they get so powerful?
Got me. Because what they're doing isn't legal. And by the way, one of the names, and that's not a secret, is Don Spencer, who's the chief appraiser at the Denton Central Appraisal District. I have said publicly I intend to put him behind bars. The reason why I'm going after these people is because I have been very public with your help and with the help of other people. I've written documents. And by the way, when I send out one of those emails, I literally send it to those people. I'm not hiding anything. I'm giving it to them. I'm telling you, these are the laws you're violating. Your problem is you chose to ignore them, which breaks federal law. So I don't know what the DOJ is going to do. What I do know is that the map that we have built is irrefutable. The evidence is irrefutable because it's government evidence. So
Mitch,
why they do what they do? They exist on the back of the taxpayer. Let's look at it that way. School superintendents here in Texas, do you know that many of them earn over $500,000 a year? They get paid a lot of money to turn the other cheek.
wow. I want to drop the video that we did before in the show notes below, but I want to go back to one. I just want to have you recap something because it just reminded me. I'm amazed that the school districts have this kind of power. I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, when you say it's all being done in the, for the schools, I mean, as parents, we want to say, well, the schools need the money. We want to educate our children. We want to certainly, a lot has come out about that. And a lot of people are not happy with some of the things that are being taught in the schools, but that's a completely different subject. But can you recap the scenario where, and you'll straighten it out if I screw it up. So the school's kind of established from our last talk, what I got out of that was the school's kind of established like this, well, we can write how much money we need. And then we know that the property tax is a large percentage of that, maybe all of it, I don't know, you can correct me, but goes towards, well, it doesn't all go to school district, but a lot of it goes to the school district. Where there was scenarios where, and specifically, and I don't remember how many tens of thousands of houses, but they actually yanked those houses out of assessment. Somebody who wasn't qualified to change the numbers, just changed the numbers and put them back in the system. Can you straighten me out? I probably botched that pretty badly, but just kind of tell everybody what I'm talking about.
Okay, so first off, when the press is used and abused by the school districts come out and they say, well, we need more schools because this is about the children. The bottom line is, this is not about the children. This is about pensions. Your children are being used as shields. And when we discovered the case of the pensions that are being hid, the investment pools, those are pensions that are undefined as to where that money is, who's running the pension, who got tenure. in that pension, who paid into that pension, what's coming out of that pension, i.e. pension/investment pools. These are all serious questions that need to be answered. Well, a few months ago at the Tarrant Appraisal District, Tarrant is Fort Worth, they said we need to freeze these real estate taxes for 3 weeks. A week later, 13 school districts, 13 schools inside of Tarrant County showed up at the next Tarrant Appraisal District meeting and said, if you do not raise these taxes in perpetuity, we are bankrupt. Well, I had a memo on a local judge's desk that morning because there happened to be somebody in that audience texting me as to what was going on. And inside that memo, it said, I hate to inform you, you idiots are bankrupt today. Giving you another 10 cents isn't going to accomplish anything. It's going to delay the inevitable. So that is the reality. People, mom and pop, are being lied to straight to their face. When the press comes out and says, well, they're doing this for the children. Well, here's a problem. Let's look at what just happened recently. A school district here in Texas just filed bankruptcy last week. There's something called the Bond Review Board. Governor Abbott sits on that board. He's the chair. That board is a sovereign wealth fund. Now, so it's not the Bond Review Board, but it's the Bond Guarantee Program. And the Bond Guarantee Program has the heading of a sovereign wealth fund. That Bond Guarantee Program is allegedly worth $250 billion. It's been built up over a long period of time. Did that Bond Guarantee Program show up to rescue that bankrupt school? So far, the answer is no. What's the purpose of the Bond Guarantee Program? So when you start digging in under the hood and you start looking at it through the lens of pensions and who's getting the money, now you have a whole different picture. And that is what's going to the DOJ. So the other thing is where you were headed, the predetermined budgets. Well, if you read USPAP, which I have many times, there's no such thing and there's no such word as predetermined budget. What is the nexus between a predetermined budget handed to the chief appraiser of the Central Appraisal District, any school superintendent? What's the nexus between that and the value of your house? The answer is nothing. Zero. Well, there's your fraud. The simple fact that somebody's saying, well, this is the money that we need. Think this through for a second. This is the money that we need with no bond schedule, no sources and uses, no notes to the balance sheet. Give us this money. Trust us. Knowing full well where you were just headed a second ago, that Don Spencer admitted on tape that they took 60,000 properties outside of the database, manipulated them in Excel, and put them back. Give us the money, no notes to the balance sheet, no sources and uses, 60,000 properties. And by the way, if you don't give us the money, we're going to take your house. That is RICO. It's creating a false debt and threatening. And RICO, it conforms to every one of the elements of RICO, including crossing state lines. Again, spelled out in the DOJ criminal complaint.
I want everybody to see the 16th Amendment. That's easy to find. It says Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on income from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. What does that mean to you, Mitch?
There's no ability under the 16th Amendment whatsoever to charge a real estate tax, right? It's a tax on incomes. That's what the 16th Amendment allows. It doesn't allow for fictitious, well, we're going to take everything you have and we're just going to make it up. There's no law anywhere that says any taxing authority has the right to guess at anything. Doesn't exist.
And when you did your research on how many thousands of homes was taken out of the system and put in an Excel sheet?
Just in Denton County alone, 60,000 houses, 60,000 properties.
And in your research, how were they revalued? Did an appraiser revalue those properties?
By hand. How do you like that one? Go through the list. They could simply say on the Excel spreadsheet, said, okay, take this value and say X value times 1.50. It could be that fast. And the public is completely clueless, doesn't even know what happened. Nobody would have known but for Don Spencer stating that fact. Well, when he stated that fact, we got busy. And what we determined at that time, we ran with an analysis, and it figures out how bad a population of something occurring would be given a certain infection rate. Well, the infection rate is the fraud, but the answer to the question was, it proved that, based on his comment, that 76% of the Denton Central Appraisal District database was corrupt. Then we said, okay, what if Don Spencer lied and it really wasn't 60,000 properties and it was 80,000? Well, that turned into 92% corrupt data. And that problem, again, is a pattern and practice, because here's what happens. Let's just say that situation occurred 4 years ago. So your first year is a fraud. Now your second year is a cumulative compound fraud, because they do the same thing. So in other words, if you start off with a base and your base is a certain number, 200,000, and the next year they raise that up 30%. Well, your first year was 200 grand, but that was already up 30 or 40%. Then they do it again. Then they do it again. It's compound cumulative. And that's why the values of your houses in today's market are pure fraud. It simply can't be true. Now, there's another way to back into this. Look at the median household income. And I've been pounding the table on this. Everybody, all these economists, these talking heads out there are complete fools. And the reason why they're fools, and the reason why they're wrong, and the reason why the central appraisal districts are criminal, they're criminally liable for what they're doing, is because the median household income, that tells you the truth. If you look at how much the average is across any given district in the United States of America, school district, taxing district, whatever you have, the truth is found in the median household income. In the case of Denton County, if your median household income is $109,000, that means that that family who's got a median household income of $109,000 can afford a $296,000 home based on today's current costs. Okay? Do you know that Don Spencer has come out and said, and it's been in the press as well, well, the average price of a house in Denton County is $514,000. It can't be the average price when the median household income, being the average, can't afford it. It's a fraud. It's a lie. It isn't true. And they've levered it up. They've taken the lie and they've levered it up into the school district bonds. So whether I'm standing here and issuing this complaint to the DOJ, either people get on board and get this fixed and work these debts down effective immediately, or this system will blow to shreds. Give or take, you've got $5 trillion across the United States right here, right now, today. Never mind the cumulative compounding effect of the school district saying, well, we're going to go raise more bond money tomorrow morning. It's $5 trillion that can't be paid for. It's a fraud. Where's the money going to come from? That's the problem.
Well, I know that you had mentioned too that the judge this was presented to back then, basically, again, I could be messing this up from memory, but basically said, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, and kicked it back.
Yes, that's true. We're in front of the Fort Worth Court of Appeals right now. The final brief is due, I believe, within the next 20 days. It'll probably be heard within 20 days after that. But Mr. Mashburn, who has done a lot of the research on the 313 agreements, took a criminal complaint just a week ago, 10 days ago, to the police and to his local DA. And they looked at him, they sat on it. He went back 4 days later and they said, well, we just don't know what to do with this. Well, okay. What's really going on here? You have DAs that don't want to prosecute. You have police that in their defense, they may not know what to do, but the police should have taken it to the DA. The DA should have taken it to the local judge immediately. The facts are the facts. Nobody yet to this point, with all these views, has said anything we've done is wrong. Just the opposite. We've got thousands of signatures on the petition. Lord knows how many comments there are in these videos. So the point of the matter is, the facts are the facts. Well, when Mr. Mashburn called me and said, these people are clueless, they don't know what to do, or they're playing that they don't know what to do, that's the definition of a closed loop system, closed loop economic system. Give us the money and we'll do what we have to do in order to block you from moving forward. Well, the judge in my case punted, which all it does is delay the inevitable, because one way or the other, if necessary, this will go to the Supreme Court of the United States. We're fully prepared. But in the meantime, I thought about it and said, okay, if this is the game they want to play, let's just go ahead and let's file this, all of it, lock, step, every single path, who did it, how they did it, what they did. Let's file it with the DOJ. So we literally have spent the last 10 days nonstop, morning, noon, and night, getting this memo prepared. It's a criminal complaint. This is a sworn criminal complaint. And so Mr. Mashburn is going to submit his. I'm going to submit mine. Mine will have a thumb drive with a link to all the evidence. A lot of that evidence is on our website. So they will be able to go through this document, follow the map, follow the bouncing ball, and click on every shred of evidence that ties to exactly what I am saying.
Have you met any opposition? I mean, are you getting threats of any kind? I mean, are you concerned?
No, I'm not concerned, because if you think about it, who would I be concerned about? Those people who we are pointing the finger at and saying, this is what you did? That's a fact. What's so unusual about this is that those people who refuse to do their job, do you realize that they are voting against their own family, voting against their own pocketbook, voting against their own constituents, and voting against society? So the reason why, other than one person saying, hey, I make my living as a real estate tax consultant. No, that person said, I make my living, but I know why you're doing what you're doing. I don't like it, but I can't argue with you.
So nobody's come forward with a strong opposition or trying to block you in any way, saying, oh shit, what has he found out? Nothing. I mean, you're out there, Mitch. I mean, you certainly, being on this video, I mean, you're out there.
There's no defense. They literally do not have a defense. The law is clear. The problem is that the law has been ignored. And in reality, these people that are the defendants in this criminal complaint, they've done an end run around the Constitution of the state of Texas and the United States of America.
I want to pull up the 14th Amendment too, because we talked about the 16th Amendment, but you referenced the 14th Amendment in this video. Section 1 of this says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. How does where it says or property, how is property taxes directly violating that?
There's no law under the 16th Amendment that allows those property taxes to occur. Taxes can only occur based on income, period.
So only if they were to sell the house, take the gain, have gain or capital gain, then taxes would be due. But constitutionally, you have found that it is illegal or against the Constitution for anyone to be charged a property tax on their real estate.
Yes, but you have to take it one step further. Well, why would that be? Well, The answer to the question is, think about it for a second. You now have debts that are greater than 50% of the value of the home as a direct result of ignoring the 16th Amendment. That is why the 16th Amendment says what it says. You can tax an income. You cannot tax property. We are at the tipping point. People can't pay that. Where's that money going to come from to pay $5 trillion worth of fraudulent bonds? The answer is that those bonds have to be worked down. Those people who sold those bonds, they're culpable in this. What due diligence did they do? And that'll come out when the DOJ gets involved and digs in. They'll make the calls to those people who sold those bonds. Turn over your files. What due diligence did they do to determine that the initial standpoint, the initial beginning point of all of this is a fraud?
Well, you had said something about, I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind, you were talking about Doge having the ability through AI to find out where, all these information on the bonds. I mean, maybe they have like this underground tunnel like they did with the Social Security files, or maybe they can't get it because they don't have them. I want to show, let's talk about the money. Let's kind of address where the money goes, how much transparency is with that. For those listening, you should be able to search how many real property counts. What I did here, I'm going to pull up Maryland, but you should be able to go to Google, search how many real property counts there are in your state, and it should be pulling this information by your state's Department of Taxation real property website. I'm sure all 50 states have that. If not, they must have something to show you how many property accounts. But I want to just pull up here on the Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation, highlighted a couple things here. In Maryland, there are more than 2 million property accounts. The Department of Assessments and Taxation must appraise each of these properties once every 3 years. There are 24 local state assessment offices, one in each county and Baltimore City. Assessments are certified by the department to local governments, where they are converted into property tax bills by applying the appropriate property tax rates. An assessment is based on an appraisal of the fair market value of the property. An appraisal is an estimate of value. There are 3 acceptable approaches to market value: the sales approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. While differing in the method of calculation, each approach is designed to indicate the property's fair market value. The property tax is primarily a local government revenue. Counties and cities depend on their property tax and a portion of their income tax to make up their budgets. Mitch, anything that you can see or say about what I just read that maybe you're finding isn't happening other than what we've just talked about?
No, that's their standard line that you will find across all central appraisal districts. But then they will go on further to say, well, we adhere to USPAP. But the bottom line is, the third sentence you read, well, based on the income approach. In the case of Denton Central Appraisal District, we have what's called income calculation worksheets that they use. Those income calculation worksheets are made up. They make up the income, they make up the expenses. They say, this is what we believe your rents should be. So actuals don't matter in their fantasy life. And the net result of them creating fraud on that income calculation worksheet, fraud isn't the true description of what it is. It's full-blown bank fraud. That's what they're doing. Because that's the ramification of making up false income statements.
Is it different for investors? I think of, will their sort of stance be, or justification be, that you are realizing income in rents? So would it be any different for a multifamily operator that's renting apartments for people to live in, or would it be any different from a commercial property where like you said, the assessment could be based on actual income.
No, the pattern in practice is fraud straight across the categories, be it multifamily, commercial, or single family, or industrial, or land, farmland. So they just make it up. That's the bottom line to meet a predetermined budget. The income calculation worksheets occur at retail and at the multifamily level. We have multifamily properties that literally went up 100% in 1 year, literally in value. Well, did those rents go up 100% in that year?
No.
No.
They're not
So-
allowed to in a lot of cities. You can't. You got rent controls.
Well, that too. Yeah, exactly. And then from the standpoint of retail, there's a property, it's a graph, it's an exhibit that's being delivered to Pam Bondi at the DOJ in this criminal complaint that literally shows that property on an annual basis has had cost increases by virtue of its value anywhere between 180 and 420% per year. There's no truth behind what they're doing whatsoever. It's a lie. And Chris Luttrell, a Denton Central Appraisal District, on tape said, well, we're just doing what we were taught. Okay, Mr. Luttrell, if you were taught to commit murder, does it make it legal? So you see, the entire system has to go. There's no justification for what they're doing. They have violated so many, I kid you not, it's over 15 pages of laws that have been broken here, both federal and state. USPAP itself, there's no reason for it to exist. The Texas Property Tax Code, well, we don't care about that either, right? Because Texas Property Tax Code requires USPAP. We're not going to adhere to that. Texas Constitution requires uniform and equal. Yeah, we're not going to adhere to that. So the reality is that the state of Texas, by ignoring everything that we've put out there, has in fact violated the U.S. Constitution, and they will lose. The state of Texas will lose at the Supreme Court. It's called the Supremacy Clause. State of Texas and anybody that's operating within the state of Texas does not have the right whatsoever to violate the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution trumps state of Texas law.
I want to look at this Maryland.gov website. Again, I'm going to publish all of these show notes, the links to the videos, links to Mitch down below. All you do is click on, I think it says more or whatever, to expand the whole show notes below, and you can look at these documents, and maybe that will help you when you're trying to find your own state documents. But I want to pull up this. This is a County Revenue Outlook report for fiscal 2024. And we scroll down here to page 7 of the report. And I just want to show the difference in one fiscal year change to the next. And I found it kind of interesting at the top here, property taxes. If you look at fiscal year 2022 to 2023, you see 1.7%. Fiscal year 2023 to 24, 6.1%. You can see the jump in their annual percentage of their percentage of revenue that they get from different aspects or different, types of sources. States are multi-sourced. They're multi-source income generation. So, I mean, like where you only work your job, if you only have one job, you have a single source. If you have rental properties or you have a side gig, you have multi-sources. States have multi-sources for income. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that from fiscal year 22-23 to fiscal year 23-24, you saw a gigantic jump, right? Almost, I don't know, 300%, more than 300%. They did a 2-year average here that says, but it was only 3.9% per year. I just thought it was, when you're looking at it, it would be very easy to justify, hey, I'm charging you $5,000 this year, but I'm charging you $20,000 next year. But if you look at the difference between $5,000 to 20,000. It's only 15,000. It's only 7,500 a year increase. The next slide.
That's fraud by omission.
The next slide here, which I thought was very interesting. These are not my numbers, guys. These are right here. Local tax revenue forecast to inch upward. It shows fiscal 22, 23, 24. Well, I'm just looking at property taxes. This is in millions, so that you understand. So this is $9.587 billion fiscal year 2023. But the interesting thing is, it's gone up almost $600 million, over $500 million from fiscal year 23 to 24 property tax revenue for here in Maryland. Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah. The best way to describe that's equity stripping. They're literally stripping the equity out of mom and pop's house, and they're flipping it to cover off the crimes of fraud that these school districts and these central appraisal districts have committed. Give us the money, get a second job to pay your taxes. And if you don't, we'll take your house. That is RICO. And that's what they're doing. They are equity stripping to the point where I literally ran this 10 days ago. What's the benefit of owning a house versus renting? Well, those two lines, based on the spreadsheet that I put together, they're superimposed on top of one another. They're neck and neck. They literally have destroyed the American dream of home ownership. These bonds can't be paid for. There's no money to pay for them. Mom and pop doesn't have the money. You can equity strip till the cows come home. It isn't going to happen. So you may as well fess up and say, yeah, this is bad. And now let's go to work and let's get these fraudulent bonds reduced by 70% to try and save the system. Or, regardless of me standing here, the system will implode on its own weight. This can't go on. It's over. We're at the tipping point. It's all exposed now, and it will be within the next 2 or 3 days once this document is sitting on Pam Bonnie's desk. So the point of the matter is, it doesn't matter what your central appraisal district is doing. They're all in it up to their eyeballs. Anybody that says, well, here's our predetermined budget, pay it. Under what grounds, under what constitution, and under what math? Because it isn't in use, pal.
What do you think the chances, Mitch, of Pam Bondi doing anything? And I say that because, I don't want to. I mean, I don't know. I think, we just had all this Epstein stuff in the news, right? And you get, Pam Bondi came out and said, tomorrow we're going to release all the files. And then she comes out and says, well, she doesn't have all the documents. And I'm like, you've been a prosecutor. You've been you're in a very high level position. You have something on your desk. You didn't know that it wasn't a full complete of files. I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm a real estate broker, way out of my pay grade or capability. But do you think that she's going to do anything with this stuff? I mean, do you think you have, and don't take this the wrong way, but do you think you have rose-colored glasses in any aspect that you think that this is actually going to make a difference? I mean, we had Snowden come out and say that, what was going on and everybody's like spying on us and all that stuff. And he goes off to Russia and whatever. And no one ever did anything about it. Nobody basically cared. I mean, do you think everything that you're doing here, do you think that this is going to have an impact?
If those debts are not brought down, it's called a workout. As I said, this system will implode because it is quantifiably impossible for those outstanding fraudulent bond debts to be paid. I don't know what the DOJ is going to do. However, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, came out a week ago and said he's in favor of eliminating the real estate taxes. Now, I know some of the things that are going on behind the hood there, behind the scenes, but even there, because even Governor Abbott has said the same thing. Well, he's in favor of eliminating the real estate tax. And to your point, it doesn't happen. The difference now is that we have quantified the magnitude of this situation. This is something that isn't going away. The evidence is the evidence. The facts are the facts, and it's the government's own documents. You cannot possibly sit here at this point and say, yeah, we're going to ignore this, because all that happens is you're violating even more federal laws. Knowledge and power to prevent. Well, that's a federal law.
Look,
You
Mitch,
have the knowledge, you know the laws are being broken, and you have the power to prevent. 1, 2, 3, you're guilty.
I mean, Mitch,
So
I think if anybody owns property, I would say, I mean, I would think that if you own property, well, even if you're renting, because the way that you describe it is rents could be much less if property owners weren't assessed property real estate tax. So I would think that almost 100% of people should be on board with not having this type of taxation. I want to play. I want to play a clip here. CNBC published this video. I just want to play a little clip of this, and then we'll talk about it.
State governments in the U.S. are running out of cash.
After meeting our obligations, we have very little money left.
One count suggests that 27 states lack the necessary funds to pay their bills. The problem is most prominent in states like Connecticut, New Jersey, and Illinois.
Not only city of Chicago, but state of Illinois is running straight into a brick wall in terms of its finances. City of Chicago is facing $1 billion deficit. State's facing a massive deficit while also needing to bail out things like the Chicago Transit Authority. Chicago Public Schools is asking for a bailout. The state cannot afford these things.
Exactly what you're saying. The schools were in there, man, saying that they need money. The show notes of this video actually say that 27 state governments lack necessary cash on hand to pay their bills, according to researchers. Again, CNBC video, dropped a link below as well. You all can watch the whole thing. The whole video is quite fascinating to me. And Mitch, I know during the pandemic, states received about 800, maybe it was more, I don't know, but about $800 billion in federal funding during the pandemic. I'm sure most of that is pretty much gone. If you're successful doing, what you're doing, how will that affect states? How will they make up the loss of revenue?
nobody's saying eliminate tax. What I am saying is eliminate the real estate tax in favor of the uniform state's sales tax. And the bill that Helen Kerwin has that I wrote says we're going to go for 15% sales tax. And that would be applicable, by the way, across all states. It's not necessary across all states. Some states will be 12%. There's a mathematical formula to get there. Here's the point, though. On the 15% sales tax, that's also including what we already have at 8%. So it's a total of 15%. But in 3 years, once these school debts are well known and brought down, well, that 15% will come down to about 13%. There's plenty of money to cover off the police and the fire and good qualified teachers. You're getting rid of the fat in the middle. And to that point, we ran the math, like in Denton County alone, it's got roughly $90 billion of outstanding bond debt. But we figured out that roughly $6.5 billion would be saved in 1 year by getting rid of the fat in the middle. You get rid of these central appraisal districts and everything that touches them. This is massive amounts of money. So if you go to the store and you buy a chocolate bar, that chocolate bar will have a total of a 15% tax on it for the next 3 years. And then it's going to drop down to 13% once all this stabilizes out. The nexus here, there's a different level of criminality. So let's say a certain school district is a small criminal and they've only added up maybe $10,000 per household of debt. Okay, fine, it's wrong, but it's fixable. Those school districts that are big criminals, $90,000, $180,000, $240,000 of debt per household. Well, that's where the focus of the work downs and workouts have to occur. And if they cannot be worked out and worked down, then those school districts, A, can be put into conservatorship, B, put into immediate bankruptcy. File them into involuntary bankruptcy. Now, That raises the question, what happens with the bond guarantee program that Governor Abbott is in charge of? Yet to be determined. Allegedly, there's $250 billion there. What I have suggested is that bond guarantee program be seized by the federal government. Because until these answers are known, that's a bucket of money that nobody should be spending, because the truth is, it's the public's money. It's the real estate taxpayers' money. The problem that has occurred here is the fraud at the hands of these school districts, for which, at this point, in many cases, vast majority of cases, cannot be paid down because the money doesn't exist, just like that video you were showing from CNBC. I mean, that's the reality.
Well, I know for our state, we have a lot of controversy going on right now because, we look at it on this Maryland.gov, governor.maryland.gov article here. It says, it's no secret that our state is facing deep budget deficit totaling nearly $3 billion this year alone. I mean, Maryland is looking at a $3 billion deficit. I think it's very interesting what you're saying. If the school districts have levered up the property tax money into bonds, and what you're saying is, hey, let them go bankrupt. Let these bonds pay the bill. Let these bonds pay the debt. Mitch, man, I commend you on what you're doing. I don't think that I know personally anybody other than you that would dedicate so much of their time and their life to what you're doing. It is, very commendable. How can people get on? We're publishing your Mockingbird property website that has tons of links. What can people do to get on board with this in their own state?
If there were, across the United States, 100 criminal complaints that mirror what I'm doing, and as soon as that criminal complaint is literally put in a package, I will send you that criminal complaint. If those people would get on board, that would be enough to turn the tide, because you're naming names in your own state for those people who have done this. And that will put so much pressure on them that they're going to have no choice. One of two things is going to happen. A lot of people are going to jail, or they're going to have to get on board and say, that's it. We have to put a stop to this. And I want to make a point about that $3 billion you were just looking at. When somebody says we have a deficit, you've got to dig in under the hood and figure out what caused the deficit. So is it a deficit because you've run out of money to pay the interest on the compound cumulative principal? And that's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. And that, in essence, is what we're talking about here. The whole system is a Ponzi scheme. When you have 50% debt loads over and above your own home mortgage, you owe another 50% on top. And that money is being used to pay strictly interest, not to reduce the principal. Well, that's a Ponzi scheme. We'll just keep collecting money from whoever we can collect it from and hope like hell that the system doesn't implode or that we're not found out. The problem is you've now been found out. So, and by the way, even on that other slide that you showed, and even you yourself said, well, this is billions, yet they only had 5 digits. Why do you think they printed that way? They're hiding the truth from the public. Fraud by omission. Don't tell the public what you don't want them to see. Hide it. Oh, it's not so bad. It's only 5 digits. Except, no, it's not. It's 11. So you see, all these systems are falling apart. And the harder they dig to hide the truth, the more money that's required to pay the interest on the fraud. So pushing this can down the road is doing the exact opposite of what should be happening. What should be happening is to say, okay, this is horrific. And in order to save the system, we're going to have a 70% haircut in these bonds. And people are going to say, well, but that's my pension and my 401k. And I want to point that out. Who do you think are the investors inside of these school bonds? It's the pension funds and the 401ks. Who sold this junk bonds? Well, those are either the bond underwriters and or the entities themselves. Such entity may be Morgan Stanley, Vanguard, Fidelity. However they're selling it, doesn't really matter. The point is, this is junk bonds. It never was A-rated paper. It was a lie. It was a fraud. Well, let's keep this line of thought going for a second. If you've got junk bonds that are owned by mom and pop by virtue of their 401k and their pensions, they're going to get a 70% haircut. There's no doubt about it. And by the way, so should those who sold the bonds. But 70% haircut is better than a 100% haircut or worse, because if the system blows, every stitch of these bonds isn't going to get paid back. There's no money to do it.
So you're saying it's going to affect pensions?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Any
sir.
idea what pensions specifically are invested in these school bonds?
That's an AI question. We've looked at this, but it's spread out because it gets complex in that, let's just say it's Morgan Stanley for a second. So Morgan Stanley would say, well, we've put together an investment pool comprised of bonds, junk bonds in reality, but bonds from across the United States. So you'd have to undo all of that.
Layers.
And it's no different than the mortgage-backed securities. And I know you know this, but the mortgage-backed securities were basically 1,000 mortgages cut 1,000 different ways, like lines of cocaine, and packaged up and then sold off as if it was credit paper. Well, it's not. It's paper chasing paper. You cannot get to the underlying asset.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, you have the exact same thing with these school bonds. What assets does a school have?
It reminds me, I mean, look at what happened with AIG. I mean, the bailouts, I mean, because that affected the pension funds that were, backing all of these retirement plans for the government employees, right? And they're like, well, we can't let the AIG fail. I mean, we've got to bail this out because same thing as what you're saying. Mitch, how many states would you say are already on board?
How many states?
Yeah, like with what you're doing, are there other states other than what you're doing in Texas where they're on board?
There are a lot of people. Let's put it this way. We have a signature from every state in the union. We have a lot of signatures. So there are people that are out there. It's hard for people to understand the idea of filing a criminal complaint because it's a fairly complex document. It shouldn't be, but because the evidence is what it is, in my case, in the way that we've built it, this thing will be well north of 50 pages. However, smaller criminal complaints can be put together. So yes, there's a lot of people in a lot of states. I just found out about Tuesday last week that there's a class action rolling forward in Arkansas. Here in Texas, they frown upon class actions. We talked about doing that originally, and Matt said no because it's frowned upon. But Arkansas, he just got permission from the court to roll forward. So that's a big deal. So yes, it's happening at a slow pace. I'm only one person and I'm doing the best I can to get this information out there. But the big kahuna now is going to be this criminal complaint because I've even asked in the videos that I've done, if anybody from the government has anything to say that I've done wrong and say, fix this number or do this, I'm all ears. We'll do it immediately. We'll pull it, we'll fix it, we'll do whatever.
But nobody
it's never
has.
happened.
Yeah. So what you're really hoping for, I guess what everybody else is hoping to benefit off of your coattail, is that this is something is done at your level in Texas that will make a pathway or open it up, just like all these lawsuits that have been happening against the National Association of Realtors and Brokers all across the country. As one penetrates and becomes successful, then it becomes case law, and then there are the doors are open or the paths are open up for other people to Mitch what you're doing. You'll be famous. You'll go down and let me tell you, man. I mean, if you're successful in doing this, I mean, you're gonna be a famous man.
The math is applicable across the United States. And I have stated that 5 different times, literally, in that DOJ complaint. Here's a chart. Here's what happened. Here's what happened in Texas. Here's how it's happening across the rest of the United States. The math is applicable across the United States. I've driven that point home in that criminal complaint with the idea of doing exactly what you're saying, which is, can you do it simultaneously for the rest of the states? Yes, except that I cannot deliver individuals' circumstances.
Yeah.
They need to take their circumstances and file their own criminal complaint. And as far as I'm concerned, this was never really about me. This is really the ability of mom and pop to be able to afford rent. And when we locked onto this problem, it was real clear they couldn't. And it has affected my business, right? Like I said, I'm a monkey in the middle. I'm a developer. I'm only as good as my tenants can pay rent. And if they can't pay the rent, I can't build. And I want to build, but I'm not stupid. If I go into this market, labor shortage, supply shortage, hyperinflation of overvaluation and overtaxation caused by criminals at the central appraisal districts and the school districts, which are the taxing entities, I would need my head examined, right? You can't get a rate of return. The risk is way too high. So I don't really have a choice to do but what I am doing. And we wouldn't have gone to the DOJ but for the officials themselves saying, yeah, we're not sure what to do with this. Okay, well, if you don't know and you're too afraid to take it to your local judge, well, then we're going to do what I wanted to do in the very beginning, which is get this out of the state of Texas and put it in the hands of the federal government, i.e. the DOJ. And that's where this is going. Step one. Step two, depending on what happens at the Fort Worth Court of Appeals, will be the U.S. Supreme Court. So we're coming after them criminally, and we're coming after them through the U.S. Supreme Court under 16th, 14th, 5th, and First Amendments.
Thanks so much, Mr. Wexler. We will be keeping an eye on you and, your progress, and certainly feel free at any time to reach out and, hope to get you back on the show to talk about next steps.
Perfect. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, you can let us know by smashing that thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please consider doing so now. Hit that alert bell. You'll know every time we upload content just like this. Keep those comments and questions coming. And one of the biggest compliments you can do for us all here at Sachs Realty is to share our channel and this video with your family and friends. This will help us to continue to build this amazing online community with viewers just like yourself. See you next time. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.